Hey guys, this video I'm going to be talking about Protection Warrior, how good I think it is, how it compares to Feral, and so on and so forth. So right at the gate, obviously a lot of people think Prot Warriors suck, think they're really bad, think Ferals are much better. I'd say it's probably consensus amongst most people playing WoW that Feral is better than Warrior, that Warrior is suboptimal but can be used. And I think a lot of people would consider Feral to be the better tank, and most people say from Black Temple onward, so from tier 6 content through the rest of the game, they would consider Feral to be just better. The reason why they wouldn't say that in tier 5 is because most bosses in tier 5 crushed, so shield block was much better in tier 5 content. So that is what we're going to be talking about, Feral versus Bear from tier 6 onward. So let's get into it. First of all, right out the gate, I want to clarify some things. I do not think Prot Warriors are good off tanks. I would not run a Prot Warrior as an off tank. Certainly you could, but I think Ferals are significantly better as off tanks. Second, I would not try and convince someone that a Prot Warrior is best in a speedrunning guild or a really high parse guild. You can't just make 6% crit come out of thin air. If people want to pink parse, 99 parse, they want to do as much damage as possible. The Bear gives them 6% crit. The Prot Warrior gives them nothing that increases their damage. Only thing I can give you is a battle shout, but you could have just gotten that from a DPS Warrior. What Prot Warrior can provide is safety. That's not something that a parsing guild is interested in. That's not something a speedrunning guild is interested in. They're interested in doing more damage. Cool. Now that we have that out of the way, what I'm going to be saying is that I think that as a main tank, I think Prot Warriors are optimal, the best tank of the three, and I'll mainly be comparing to Bear for main tank reasons. But I think they're the best main tank for most guilds, even in Sunwell. So that's what I'll be talking about through the video. So first thing I want to get right out of the way is Prot Warriors are hard. Just to show you really quick, if I'm like fighting this guy, this is what a Prot Warrior needs to do every fight. They're shield slamming off cooldown. They're revenging off cooldown. They're trying to maintain Thunderclap, Demo Shout. They need to be shield slamming and revenging off cooldown. While this is happening, they need to make sure their rage doesn't get too low. They are going to be maintaining their shout, whether it's battle or commanding. They are going to be using Devastate as a filler, and then they're going to be using Heroic Strike to spend any excess rage. Now, why this is hard is because, again, Classic is a simpler game than a lot of other games. It's easier than retail by and large rotationally. When you compare all the rotations that Classic TBC has, Prot Warrior would be one of the harder ones. You might maybe compare it to something like Hunter. Hunter is going to be harder to play perfectly. Warrior is more punishing. If you're a Hunter, you screw up your rotation, you're clipping a bunch of autos. Okay, you should have done 2,000 damage, you do 1,700. It is what it is. A lot of times that's not the difference between killing a boss or not. As a Prot Warrior, if you're doing your rotation wrong, and it's really easy for Warriors to have systemic issues with the rotation that they constantly make, you're losing threat and your raid is wiping. So it's much more high stakes. But as a Warrior, it's really easy to overspend rage. It's really easy to not shield slam off cooldown enough. It's really easy to have your debuffs fall. It's easy to forget to reapply your shout. It's easy to not shield block enough, so you're taking too much damage throughout the fight. It's easy to not heroic strike enough, so you have too high rage, or overspend rage, so you can't use your abilities. Long story short, I'll leave it out there. The rotation is harder than most at a role that is important, and a role that is oftentimes distracted by other stuff, either positioning bosses, handling mechanics, so on and so forth. So Prot Warrior is difficult for a lot of people to play. Itemization-wise, I'll try and keep this brief as well. Itemization is very difficult for a Prot Warrior. Just to give you guys a little bit of perspective, there's a lot of different gear you can use on a Prot Warrior. Personally, I use a lot of different gear. I use 3 different gloves, 2 different belts, I use 4 different pants. I use 1 boot. I use like 6 different rings in Sunwell. I use like 5 or 6 trinkets. I use 4 different ranged weapons. Only use 1 shield. I do have a dual wield weapon though. I only use 2 main hand weapons. I use 2 different wrists. I use 2 different chests, 3 different cloaks, 3 different shoulders. I use 3 different necks. Really just 1 though for bosses. So I'll say 1. The other ones I've been talking about bosses, so I'll keep it to bosses. I use 1 neck for bosses, and I use 3 helmets. So that's a lot. That's a lot of gear. That's a lot of situational items. Some bosses, like Brutalis, shield block is good. Some bosses, like Felmist, shield block is horrible. Shield block rating, especially. Right? Bosses like Brutalis, you need to have full mitigation. And you want a ton of avoidance. All you want on Brutalis is avoidance and stamina. On a fight like Caligos, avoidance isn't as good. You just want stamina, because you can get stunned, and all your avoidance goes away when you're stunned. You're taking a lot of magic damage too. So you would want different gear on Brutalis that you use on Caligos. You would want to use different gear on Felmist, because on Felmist you can't taunt the boss, you need more threat. You'd want different gear on Eridar Twins, because that's a really high threat fight. You'd want different gear on Meru as well. Long story short, hopefully you get the point. I'm not going to dwell on it too hard. Prot warriors use a lot of gear. Their sets are very situational. You can use 1 set for all of Sunwell. Except for Brutalis, you always need a different set, but it's just going to be suboptimal if you use the same gear the whole way through. And there's a lot of flexibility and stuff in your sets. So if you're sitting around telling your speedrun, hey, wait up guys, I need to fix my set or something, right? That's not going to fly. But in a normal guild, you have plenty of time to change your gear out and stuff. So all I'm trying to arrive at is that Prot Warrior is hard to play. Prot Warrior is hard to gear. There's a lot of items that are considered good that are very situational. So for example, if I were to tell a new player, they come up to me and ask me, like, is PvP gear good? Like I have a brutal gladiator chest here. Is that a good item? Yeah, it's really good. You could argue it's the best chest in the game, brutal gladiator's chest for a Prot Warrior. But I would never use it on Brutalis because it has no avoidance. And Brutalis is all about avoidance. And so if I say that this is like the best chest in the game, and then people start running this on Brutalis and start dying because they have no avoidance, well, what can you do? It's just hard. There's an exception to everything you say. So if I'm giving someone a recommendation on an item, there's an asterisk by everything, right? Like, oh, is Collar the Pit Lord really good? Yeah, it's insane. As long as you can use the expertise, right? Asterisk, you might need to check your trinket. You might overcap expertise if you're running Shard of Contempt now, right? Like, those are things that, it's just, there's always an asterisk, there's always a catch. So anyway, I don't want to get too into it. I could get in the weeds about gear for years, but on to other things. So that is why, so again, the whole buildup is they're hard to play, they're hard to gear. And I will fully admit, I've run pugs at this point probably more weeks in TBC than not for many different raids. I know as well as you do, most Prot Warriors are awful. You don't want them in your group. Most Prot Warriors are not very good. For the reasons I mentioned before, it's hard to itemize, it's hard to play. It's also, if you're a really good player and everyone's telling you that Prot Warriors are bad, you're going to reroll. It's just likely the case that if you're an overachiever, if you're someone trying to play really well, if you're in a high-end guild, everyone says they're not good, you're going to switch off it. It's just going to happen. So there's a lot of good players have switched from Prot to Fury or to Feral. So again, you're not seeing that many good Prots. So you're just going to assume they're bad. So anyway, we've covered a lot of that. Now let's go into a few things that I think are overlooked, and then I'll cover actually details about Tier 6 and Sunwell. So a lot of people overlook Thunderclap. Thunderclap's really good. It reduces the attack speed when talented by 20%. It's really, really annoying for a DPS to apply. I don't think everyone knows that you need to be in battle or defensive stance to press Thunderclap. your DPS warriors wants to be in Zerker stance. Every time they change stances, they lose rage. That's not good for them, right? At best, they can retain 25 rage every time they swap with a talent. Telling a DPS warrior to thunderclap is going to cost them damage, a decent amount of damage, and it's going to be something no DPS warrior wants to do. You might actually find it difficult to find a warrior that would do it. Whereas prot warrior is able to thunderclap for free. I think it's very important to note, a lot of people just forget thunderclap exists, and they'll say things like, oh yeah, we replaced our bear with our, or we replaced our prot warrior with our bear. Like, oh man, I'm so happy to get rid of that prot warrior, right? Well, now you lose thunderclap, unless someone else is doing it, unless the DPS is doing it, which they should. If you're running double bear tank, they should, but that's not going to be the case in every guild. Anyway. Demo shout, I'm not going to talk about too much because a DPS warrior can very easily run demo. And in fact, it's actually easier for a DPS warrior to spec into improved demo than it is for a tank. Anyway, on to shouts. So battle shout, commanding shout. If you do not have 2 warriors in your guild, prot warrior is actually really good because that means one of your melee groups is getting a battle shout, which is really good. You could say it is comparable to the 6% crit from a bear. It's really good. Battle shout's really strong. So obviously everyone is going to jump immediately. The second I say that jump, you say, well, obviously a fury can bring that. You don't need to bring a prot. A fury can do that. Sure. If you run 1 arms or 1 fury, obviously your second total warrior being a prot would give you battle shout, which is really good. They can also use commanding. Commanding shouting your tanks is, again, really good for most guilds. I understand that if you're a really high-end guild that's like perfect at everything, and if you're a speedrunning guild and everyone in the raid is moving like clockwork, yeah, you don't need the extra health on your tanks. But I'm telling you, the extra health is really good for guilds that are, progressing. Guilds that are not in the top 25%, top 10% of guilds, top 20% of guilds, right? Your average guilds, it's going to be good to have a commanding shout on your tanks. And that's something that's overlooked. And next, we have, of course, I've got a thing here of some other stuff. We've got the defensive cooldowns. This is another thing. A raid group that's really, really clean at executing strategies does not need shield wall, does not need last stand. If everyone's doing their job, you don't need these buttons. These buttons are amazing in average guilds where stuff goes wrong, right? Something goes wrong, tank presses the button, saves a wipe, saves the raid. Could be the difference between killing bosses. If a prot warrior knows how to use these defensives, it can be insane. They're always going to be undervalued in a hardcore run, hardcore raid, because they don't need it. They're not counting on it. They're also just going faster. If your raid is going through Sunwell, and let's say you're wiping a few times on certain bosses, there's a decent chance you might be able to shield wall for every boss, right? If you kill Caligos and then you wipe to Brutalis 2 or 3 times, maybe it's up for the 4th pull. If you are the more you wipe, the more you get these up, the better they are. The faster you speedrun, the less useful they are, right? Anyway, next we have got, we're just going to talk about fights that they can actually do. Because again, I want to counter the notion that as a main tank, ferals are just better than warriors starting in Black Temple. Again, for most guilds. Let's talk about Black Temple, right? Black Temple, the 2 hardest fights are going to be Illidan, and they're going to be Illidari Council. On Illidari Council, your prot warrior can spell reflect the paladin, and that helps with threat, and it also makes them take way less burst damage from the paladin. It does like 6,000 or 8,000 damage. It's a lot of damage, so it's really nice to be able to reflect that. So prot warriors are the best tank on the hardest fight in Black Temple, if you want to say it's harder than Illidan. And then Illidan themselves, they can either tank Illidan or the Elemental, and the bear can't tank. The bear can't tank Illidan, obviously, because it gets sheared. So if we're going to look at, like, again, I'm never going to argue that bears are better in speedrunning in high par skills. But if your guild is progressing, if your guild is not killing Illidan week 1, if your guild, has people in it that are making mistakes and, stuff is going wrong, the safest tank is going to be your prot warrior on Illidari Council, the hardest fight, and it gives you another option to tank Illidan as a prot warrior. The prot warrior can shield wall the enrage on Illidan, which means that when Illidan's enraging and owning you, you have plenty of time to find the trap, or you can just ignore the trap, shield wall through it. For progression, for safety, those defensive cooldowns are really, really good on those type of fights, especially when there's a really obvious enrage cast from Illidan that makes it like, hey, you shield wall. It might help, So in tier 6, for average players, is it just the case that a bear is better than a warrior? When we look at the hard fights, I don't know if that's the case, right? And sure, bears are better on Supremus for sure. They can pick up Supremus a lot better than a warrior ever could. That's 100% true. But warriors are likewise good at Reliquary. I would argue that even on a fight like Gurtog Blood Boil, shield wall is really good in case any one of your DPS died with Fel Rage. Your tanks are usually going to die to Gurtog coming in enraged, hitting your tanks. But if you shield wall it, you can get through it. So, again, if things are going wrong, if you're in an average raid, prot warrior main tank is still really good, if they're good. And that's the caveat to all of this, because most prot warriors are bad. We're comparing good warrior to good bear. Because a good bear, there's a few things they can do. They can Nightmare Seed in macros, make sure they have their Iron Shields right in their macros, always be using the right trinkets. They can be on top of their very simple rotation, but they can, I guess, do it slightly better than some. Always be quick on innervates and battle reses and stuff. But the difference between a mediocre bear and a good bear is not that big. The difference between a good warrior and a mediocre warrior is massive. Anyway, now let's talk about Sunwell, because they say starting in tier 6, bears are better than... Also, another note, if we want to go to Archimonde, the hardest raid in Hyjal, you can Stance the Fear as a warrior. That's something that could help. Bears can't Stance the Fear, but you can also easily fear ward them. If you're in a situation, again, it's all about safety. If you're in a situation where a bunch of people are dying on Archimonde, you could, for example, do something like a shield wall and tell people to heal the raid when Archimonde is sending out orbs, killing people. You can Stance the Fear, potentially save a fear ward for a healer if your guild does not have enough shamans, if you don't have 5 shamans that particular night. So again, I wouldn't say that warrior is particularly weak on a fight like Archimonde. Again, looking at the end bosses, looking at the hard fights, it doesn't seem like bear is going to be safer than warrior, but it will give you more damage. Anyway, the biggest counter to everything I'm saying, obviously, is B-res. If you want to say that warrior is safe, you could also argue that in all the fights where your bear can get out and res, which they can do it in all of the Sunwell fights, that they can get the res off, that can be the difference. Absolutely. Not going to deny that. But you could argue that some of this could outweigh that as well. That's all I'm saying. On to Sunwell. Let's talk about the hardest fight in Sunwell. Meru is the hardest fight in Sunwell. Warriors, again, are good on Meru. They can spell reflect the Void Sentinels. That prevents a big burst of damage on them. Again, a really good raid is going to say, we don't care. We'll just ground it. Use grounding totem. It's just more to do for an average guild. It's just another mechanic you need multiple people to coordinate, rely on to get the grounding down. You know, make sure that the grounding is in range of the tank that needs the grounding, and the tank who's tanking the Void Sentinels and moving all around the room in different locations. So you need the person dropping it to be moving with them. It's just annoying. So again, hardest fight in a fight like Meru, again, prot warrior is good. You can tank Entropius as a prot warrior. You can shield wall at the end of Entropius, and all your healers can heal the raid because there's insane amount of rage damage. Everyone's dying. Another example where shield wall can be good in that type of fight. Onto a fight like the other big check is going to be Brutalis. And a lot of people think prot warriors can't kill Brutalis. You can check my my logs. I'm not trying to flex my numbers. It's not. I don't think you'd consider my numbers are good. I'm talking about my Brutalis. You can go through my logs, comb my Brutalis logs, and you'll see that I'm not dying on Brutalis more than our bears. I hardly die at all on Brutalis. And if you have the right gear as a prot warrior, you are going to be tanky. Now, we have good healers, we have good assignments, but we're not a hardcore guild, and I'm not dying on Brutalis. I'm taking as much damage as bears usually. Every week I look at my active damage taken per second, and it's usually similar to the bear. On this attempt, I did use shield wall, so it makes my damage taken per second look better, but obviously that's a good thing, right? That you shield wall and reduce the damage. I also typically avoid about as many attacks as the bear, sometimes more. So this is with no Scorpid Sting. We didn't have a hunter. I usually have about 50% avoidance on Brutalis with Scorpid Sting. And yeah, bears are typically going to be around the level of avoidance. On this pool, our bear ended up avoiding about 7% less attacks than me. And again, I think a lot of people forget that if bears are gemming a lot of stamina, they start to lose some of that dodge. Or if they're using armor rings instead of some agility rings, they start to lose some of that dodge, some of that avoidance. So yeah, prot warriors, when itemized properly, and this is the gear I use, absolutely can tank Brutalis. This is where I'm going to have to go and say subjective opinion. I don't feel like I die on Brutalis, hardly at all. I would say I die less than our bears. When I look at logs, it seems like my damage taken per second is lower or equal, or or slightly above, around similar, right? But when I was on the PTR playing a Resto Shaman, all of the prot warriors I healed struggled and died on Brutalis, but they had the wrong gear. So again, it's just one of those situations where, again, if you're telling me that prot warriors can't live on Brutalis, I'm going to be right there with you. I'm like, dude, I was in a pug where our prot warrior died every stomp. Yeah. He was using the wrong gear. But yeah, I agree. But if you have a good prot warrior, they should not be dying to Brutalis. They should be as tanky as your bear. They're going to take more damage because they have less armor, but they have defensives that they can cycle to try and counteract this, right? They can use their last stand well, and they also a lot of times can get a little bit more avoidance than the bear can at similar health level. Anywho, in conclusion, we've looked at the hard bosses in Sunwell, we've looked at the hard bosses in BT. I think it would be a lot more straightforward in tier 4 and tier 5. Bears hadn't ramped up with their gear as well yet, and shield block is really good at countering crushing blows. So prot warriors are, I would say, it's not controversial to say that the best main tank in tier 4 and tier 5 content, but in tier 6 and in Sunwell, I think you can make a very solid argument that they are still the best tank for most guilds. That's all I'm saying. A good prot warrior can be better, and I'd say a lot of times is better than a feral in most guilds that are not pushing for logs super hard, guilds that are not speedrunning, guilds that are going to make mistakes, guilds that are going to be wiping. Prot warriors, I think, are really good. So it's just funny to think about, right? Because most people think they suck. Most people think they can't be played, that they should be replaced. They're not very good. Crazy to think. Perception in TBC. Crazy how far skewed it is towards damage optimization rather than safety, right? If I say that, your raid gets 6% crit across the raid, that is, it certainly can affect some of the DPS race bosses, but a lot of times that 6% crit is not going to be something that is going to determine a kill or a wipe on a boss. If I were to say something like, that 6% crit isn't going to determine that many wipes, a lot of people would scoff and say, like, are you crazy? 6% crit? Like, that's so much damage. Everybody wants to pump. Everyone wants to parse. But then if you say something like, 1100 health to the whole party is pretty good, right? Not really. Doesn't show up in a parse. Or if you say like, oh, a big shield wall, a big last stand can save a wipe. You're gonna say, well, that's not something you're gonna see in a log. There's no Warcraft logs. There's no icon that says like this warrior shield walled and saved the raid, right? But every single person in the raid that is in that that bear's group does see an increase on their parses when they have the bear in the group because they have the crit. Anyway, fun stuff to think about. Let me know what you guys think. This one went long, but I'm curious to know you guys' opinions on prot warrior versus feral. Am I a delusional prot warrior? Am I out of my mind? Give me your thoughts. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.